Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Hikigai Podcast. And this is where data meets decisions and innovations shape the future of healthcare. We have a phenomenal speaker amongst us today, Dr. LUKASZ KOWALCZYK. And he is a wonderful friend, a great mentor in many sense, who has been very supportive with our ideas at Hikigai also. And it's wonderful to have you here, Lucas. I think we're going to have a great session, discussing what we have in mind today. But before we do so, I would love for the audience to know, what your specialty is, what's your background, and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm just thrilled about the success that you all are having, Lalitha. So just a quick background on myself. I'm a physician that's extremely passionate about solving problems for other physicians and healthcare systems with technology. I'm a practicing gastroenterologist, have done so for 15 years, built and sold one of the largest GI practices in Colorado, and built my own end-to-end surgical scheduling automation platform as well that we were able to build out and scale and sell. And then also had a great opportunity with the Mayo Clinic AI Accelerator as part of their inaugural class of actually being able to go through that process and see what it takes to build enterprise healthcare at scale. So really just a really great background for me that I've enjoyed helping other practices and companies build and implement health tech that's really both clinically effective and responsible. And I left full-time clinical practice this past April to start my own advisory and consultancy to healthcare systems and AI companies looking to go to market to help them do exactly that, build clinically effective and responsible technology.
Awesome, Lucas. Yes, our first few conversations have definitely been very inspiring, and you are a great champion to support startup ideas, especially moving forward with AI and healthcare. So, onward to our, we're really going to be focusing about embedding AI in the healthcare space and just for the people and for the systems to thrive, and precisely what you're doing and that your expertise is. So our first segue into the question is the state of healthcare enterprise today. You're talking about healthcare systems that are under increasing strain financially, operationally, culturally. From your vantage point, what do you see excuse me, what do you see as the biggest barriers preventing the healthcare enterprises or the health enterprises from fully leveraging AI and meeting these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's important to state like, what is the context
Hmm.
that AI is you're trying to implement AI in. And healthcare has gone through post COVID. I just posted on this in LinkedIn about a large restructuring, right? It's really taken away a lot of the middle management roles and director roles and consolidated the process of organizational management into a much more centralized type of set of executive roles. And so what does that mean? That's translated into procurement as well. Technology procurement is now much more centralized, and systems are evaluating solutions much more on the scope of how does it serve a system-wide problem and not so much of a point solution. Well, so what does that mean? Well, that means that it's much harder to talk to maybe like a single point of contact as a decision maker. That decision maker is much more centralized, but also a lot more gatekeeping around that stakeholder or set of key stakeholders as well. And so I think that makes sense because there's a lot of financial pressures that health systems are under. Operating at a 4% margin is like phenomenal in healthcare, but a lot of healthcare systems are not operating there, and they've cut, and unfortunately they've cut the people portion of their organizations because that's the fastest way to change your financial Excel report, essentially.
Hmm.
And I'm not making light of that. What I'm saying is that it's the quickest. It's unfortunately the quickest way to make an impact on your financial metrics is the cost center. And so in terms of procurement, then systems really want to see, yeah, if you pilot something, they really want to see, though, we can pilot this. That's fine. The pilot did great. How's it going to serve on an enterprise level? And so it's really about that clinical enterprise value that I talk about in my advisory. You really have to think about delivering clinical enterprise value and not just point solutions as part of a broader strategic objective. So that's the context, I think.
Fantastic. So being clinically applicable is something which you already walked that road many years. So you would be just the right person to give that approach. So that brings us from where we go from a pilot to a permanent, right? What
Mm-hmm.
makes the AI stick and what gives that stickiness? So many of these AI projects never graduate beyond proof to concept or proof of
Yep.
concept, right? We were talking about this earlier too. What separates the pilots that fade from those that become indispensable parts of clinical workflow?
Right. So I think there's really two parts to this, right? Because there's a lot of white papers and a lot of posting on different platforms about, oh, how many AI pilots are failing. Well, I'm kind of okay with that. And depending on what you read, right? Like maybe only 30% of pilots in enterprise make it to production. I'm kind of okay there. Like, I don't see it as a big of a red flag because it means that there is like experimentation going on. And AI is really challenging because you're moving from deterministic solutions. We're moving from 20 years of cloud-based SaaS deployments, which are very deterministic. There's a very mature playbook into this probabilistic technology of AI that hallucinates, like figuring out reliability. And so I think that, enterprises, especially healthcare, isn't very agile. And so, number one, I'm okay with experimentation and failure, right? Low risk failure. So I just want to say that. But the pilots that do move forward, especially in healthcare, number one, your pilot is designed to achieve a set of metrics that then goes to conversion, right? So what I say is you don't do pilots for a pilot's sake. You do a pilot to figure out what metrics you need to meet to convert on to a broader scope of practice. So for instance, like I work a lot in the surgical space, right? And that's where I build my surgical scheduling platform. I built it out to help automate the surgical scheduling process across all stakeholders. Where I started was gastroenterology. And I was able to create like a lot of value there, create a lot of workflow optimization. But to get it to convert, right, I needed to find a partner that could help me scale it out to other specialties, right? So there was a basic template of metrics that we could hit about, can we schedule effectively? Can we risk stratify patients effectively? Can we, manage like blood thinners? Can we manage preoperative testing? All of these things effectively. And then once we validated that, we could say yes. So we can take this kind of like very specific specialty GI and expand it out to other specialties like orthopedics and other ASC-based service lines, so it could become broadly acceptable. And so designing your pilot with the enterprise or broader applicability, it creates reusability for the enterprise. They can see that we're not just going to spend money and resources on this one-point solution, but it's going to have a strategic value to us across our entire enterprise. So designing the pilot with that initially in mind, I think is really a key factor that will drive conversion.
This is a very good important take home message for us too when we're talking about moving into specialities and pretty much white labeling it and optimizing it for individual practices as and when needed. So yeah, that's a great point. Thank you so much, Lukasz. So now
Yeah.
we're talking about beyond the tool, right? We're talking about AI is a core layer, it's care delivery. We're talking about it's really coming into play. And too often we're talking about AI is treated as a bolt on and rather than a part of the
Mhm.
foundation, where people are still kind of jittered about it. They're still not accepting it fully. What does it take to technically, culturally, and operationally embed AI at the core of healthcare delivery?
Yeah. So again, I think that it's not as much. It's understanding a little bit about the technological guardrails that you need around AI. But I've done health tech for so long. I know that the failure taxonomy of technology is all about culture, people, and process. And the most important part about AI is I just personally have this like mantra and phrase: without a clear why, there's no AI. Meaning, right, if your organizational leadership is not clear about its own strategic priorities, what it wants to achieve, and then how to integrate AI to achieve those strategic priorities, you're not going to be successful. If you don't take the time to really understand what do I really want to achieve objectively as an organization, you're not going to be successful because it's going to be a haphazard strategy. And as you know, like any tool, if you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, then then you can't pick the right tool, right? As an analogy, as a clinician, if I can't prescribe a treatment, I can't pick the tool to treat a patient if I first don't have clarity on the diagnosis. And I think that that's like a very apt analogy. Once I have a diagnosis, pathways become much more clear on how I communicate to patients, what tools I use to solve their problems, because it provides the right context. The next layer down from the organizational leadership is understanding the value of process that you want to achieve that strategic objective. And the most valuable, as we started talking about, the most valuable and expensive part of any organization is people. Um, and if you understand then the people involved in that, whatever that strategic objective is, let's say it's like to optimize, your no-show rate across your surgical service line, right? Well, you have to know all the stakeholders involved and how do you assess value out of that process, which is very hard for healthcare. Well, it's understanding, once you understand every stakeholder and what their jobs are in that process, there's a cost associated with them. So, what are you paying them? And what tools are they using to execute their jobs? And what are those tools costing them? Right? So now you've created an ROI structure if you want to implement an AI or an AI agent across an entire process. So, and that's a process oriented solution. So, I think that's really the direction that healthcare needs to go, to really start thinking differently about how to leverage the value of AI across an entire process. But I mean, you can really apply this to a lot of different technologies as well.
Interesting you say that. I just wanted to share a little tidbit here that recently we had done a demo to a clinic in Michigan, and all the office bearers or the front office people were in the demo. And soon enough, they were like, "Oh my God, that's what I do, and this is what the platform is going to do for me. Are you going to take my job away?" I'm like, "No, it's going to optimize your job. It's going to take care of you, where you're able to take away some of those mundane tasks that you actually need to do." So precisely what you were talking about, caring for the people, showing that we care, and adding that value beyond it to finally show the ROIs and the returns that comes, which then we were like, ching ching, there's more to the ROIs now, and that means that you're getting more in your bonus checks. So the doctor's like, shh. That was a good point and a good thing that I wanted to share. But yeah, so we're talking now about personalization when we're talking about AI and the space of
Mhm.
AI in healthcare. So when you're talking about personalization in the real world, we often hear about this precision medicine, these golden words that we're talking about, and personalized care. But in
Hmm.
practical terms, Lucas, what does it really mean to have meaningful personalization? It looks like,
Yeah.
day-to-day clinic environments, and what keeps organizations from getting here.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's so. First of all, I love the story about augmentation rather than replacement, and I think just to back up a little bit, that's one of the keys. You can't just be selling upside. You have to also address the fears and concerns of your staff around this, and really say like really have what I call enhancement or flourishing of your staff and not some replacement strategy. And I think that's a really key communication about how you market whatever technology you're bringing in. So the personalization aspect, I think this is really key and where I see a tremendous amount of opportunity. One of the areas that I'm really excited about in AI is around voice agents right now. And why? Because they kind of fall into this quadrant. If you have like a like this two axis quadrant of like like of clinical risk, and technical debt, right? And you definitely don't want to be in a quadrant with a solution where your solution is like, yeah, high clinical risk, high technical debt, right? That's not a great starting point. But voice agents really offer a great area for low clinical risk with low technical debt, and they've already had a lot of proven benefit in other industries. So, um, uh, for instance, like reaching out to patients, right? So, for instance, like a surgical scheduler, and this is kind of again my area of expertise. A surgical scheduler, you hire them to schedule, right? You
Mhm.
want them scheduling. But what's the problem? They only spend about 20% of their time scheduling. The rest of the time is like on administrative tasks, is on, cold calling, a ton of cold calling, that type of stuff. So your scheduler is really not scheduling. It's like, 2 cents, 20 cents out of every dollar is going to only scheduling what you're hiring them for. And so shifting that, number one. So number one, getting the voice agent to do a lot of those initial phone calls, number one, and then being able to, when there's actually a live human being, like get them on the phone, right? And get your scheduler now with that person. Now your odds of scheduling go up considerably. So number one, that's great personalization right there and optimization, because the patients that are there picking up their phone and want to get scheduled, you're delivering that service. But how does that work on the patient side for personalization? Well, I think this is a big concept now in AI, and maybe you guys are exploring in your company. It's all about context, right? What is the context so the AI can provide the best information? Well, I think AI can be, these voice agents can be a capture of context. So reaching out to patients before their visits, being able to get their information into them conversationally in a very natural way, not with like all these forms and pointing and clicking, but just in a conversational way, get a better context of like, hey, why are you here? What are your concerns? What's most worrisome about your symptoms? I can't tell you how many times like I get a referral for GERD, right? But really, I ask the question, so, but how can I help you? What bothers you? And it's not, they don't say GERD, they say, I'm really worried I have esophageal cancer, right? So understanding, reframing the context and creating a more specific context for why that patient's here, and even about treatment. So, hey, do you have any specific treatment preferences? Well, I really would like to try natural treatments first. That can really help me drive a conversation with a patient to build trust. And so it's, for me, it's this whole concept of building better context. And it's not taking a human resource to do that, because the human resource may need, like, like my medical assistant, they need that face-to-face interaction. They need to, be working on other parts of our practice that require more of that little bit human connection as well. So I think that's kind of where I see it moving in terms of personalization, is creating a better context for who the patient is and why they're coming in.
Interesting. This is a very, very critical point made, and we've I've got my ears wide open to take all notes that we need to for future too. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
and
recorded, so that's good.
yes, yes, I'm glad. I'm so glad. So this brings us to the context of the engineering and the Gemba mindset, right? Which
Yes.
you love to talk about, and that's your field of interest too. In manufacturing, leaders talk about going to the Gemba, seeing the real work happen
Yes.
on the floor. In AI, you've described something similar as context engineering. And
Yep.
how can executives bridge the gap between boardroom decisions and frontline realities so
Yes.
AI actually works for clinicians and patients?
Exactly. I think in this really I want to really tie this back to the restructuring of healthcare, right? So if you've just consolidated your executive leadership team and your strategy team, right? I think one of the concerns that I have is that you've created too big of a layer of abstraction between what's going on and your strategies and the ability to effectively execute those strategies on a ground level, on a frontline worker level, on the people that these solutions are going to affect. And
Mhm.
so this is something that in this is something that I'm really concerned about. I think the most effective organizations, their executives go down and interact a lot with their frontline workers, whether it's the chief nursing officer interacting with nursing, or chief medical officer interacting with physicians. But then also, like I found when the CEO came down and did some rounds, showed up and saw what their workforce is dealing with. I think that's essential because that's again creating context. It creates the context of how you frame and make a decision. And I think a great starting point for executives, when I talk to them, when I talk to leaders, I say, pick your number one strategic priority. Pick a service line that is tied directly to that strategy and that priority. And then just make it a point over the course of a month or two to get down and talk with everybody so you understand what's going on, so you will have a much better chance of then achieving that strategic objective, because you now can put your own lens, your own leadership lens, which is so valuable, which is why you were hired in the first place, to apply it to that strategic problem. And I think that that's really the key to enabling AI, to see what levers you can pull. Then once you know that context, what AI levers can you pull to automate or enable or augment, the part of the process, and you can just have a much more targeted strategy. Again, it's all about picking the right tool and the right part of the process.
Interesting, interesting. So this is bringing us into the human side of AI success, right? We're talking about all this back end work and making sure that the entire workflow is streamlined, administrative processes. But we're talking about the human touch too here.
Mm-hmm.
So technical capability is one thing, but then we're also talking about AI success that depends on the people, which you've kind of emphasized on that at their earlier points, but
Yeah.
people and processes. So, what skill sets and mindsets, which is one of the
Mm-hmm.
most important things that do organizations need to cultivate across leadership and staff and truly make AI work? I think you've kind of elicited a few things, but I would like you to highlight this for this particular
Yeah,
point.
no, and I think absolutely. So, I'll kind of reemphasize some of the things that we've already talked about, right? And that's, I think, from a leadership mindset, being clear on your strategy. So it's got to start from the top, getting buy-in, and then I think the culture of listening and curiosity, I think, is really important because this is new technology. OpenAI's Whisper technology, their voice agent, has only been out since October of 2024, right? This is very immature technology. So you have to have the ability to uh, be able to run small, low risk experiments and listen to the feedback that your organization is giving you. And I think that's important. On a frontline level, I think it's important to show how this technology is different from other technologies that we're all used to dealing with. So our mental model for technology, I think, is the iPhone, where it's literally point and click, right? It's like you point, something happens, it's predictable, and you know the outcome, right? And that's determinism. This is a probabilistic technology. And so one of the big things is you have to shift that mindset from point and click to chat and think, right? You have to educate your workforce that, if you see a problem with the output, or you're asking a really important question to the system, and this gets into the design aspects too, but if you're asking a really critical question from an AI, you really got to understand like that answer, you may have to double check it, essentially. And that's the critical thought portion. Where does this occur, and why is this important on an organizational level? I think nursing is a really key demographic where this applies. What's going to happen? I mean, nursing is going to really face a crisis, and what's going to happen is there's an exodus of more mature, experienced nurses that are leaving, and it's creating this experience vacuum, essentially, where many younger nurses are coming in and they don't have, again, I'm going to use this word, they don't have context. They don't have the experience of seeing, a patient that's deteriorating, or just that kind of like intuition and that spidey sense, or like a lot of institutional knowledge is lost. Like, hey, you know what? If your patient really needs to get this procedure done, call this person right here. They know how to get this done, right? So and I think the nursing is going to be facing a crisis where you're not going to have as an experienced of a workforce. And are they going to over rely on AI? And are they going to like drop their cognitive skills and do a lot of cognitive offloading? Or are you going to enable them to try to help close some of that cognitive gap by reinforcing them with information that can help close some of that gap due to their inexperience? So I think that's kind of like organizationally understanding what department and unit and what people are going to be using the AI, and what is their level of clinical expertise and experience, and how do you reinforce them with it?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lukasz. So I think context was some of the most important things that you were talking about in whatever situation we're talking. But now we're moving on to building for equity and safety and scale. The AI is just so new, as you just kind of said it very critically, that we're all kind of exploring it, we're all learning it, and it's a process that the change is happening. So it does give you those ambiguous fear times, and that you're not aware of it, what's in store for us, right? So as AI becomes more embedded, and how do we make sure it reduces, not widens, health disparities, and particularly across diverse patient populations, right? When we're talking about different ethnicities and uneven data landscape.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first part is simply making that a priority in your AI strategy, right? You have to design for equity. Maybe another way to think about this, and this is kind of where my mind shift is occurring, because when I started with AI, everything was about designing the models and the data sets to make sure that they were equitable, right? Like this even distribution, that you've had like all of these data sets. And that is certainly important, and certainly one way to approach that. The other way to approach it is to detect inequity, right? So to have a system that is looking to also detect inequity. And this is a concept that I think may be more important coming down the line, because we're seeing that at inference time. So at the moment that the model is creating an output, it's creating the tokens and the answer, there's a lot of processing and reasoning that's going on at that moment. And so if you building in the guardrails at inference time to create the equity is also another strategy. But the big concept that's coming up is this concept of AI evals. And what is that? What are AI evals? That's, to me, if I'm going to put it in terms of, if you view AI as an employee, it's basically an evaluation framework for your employee, and saying to them, no, you can't do that. But in order to say, no, you can't do that, you first need to actually be able to detect when they do something wrong. And so an AI eval, it all starts by something called, look at your data is the theme. And this is very prominent already in the biggest AI companies and in the developer community already, which, I have a lot of close connections with and interact with a lot. And what this is, it's called an AI trace. So most of the time when we're thinking about like evaluating an AI system, it's only about query response. Well, in between there's a lot of stuff that happens. Okay. So there's tool calling. Well, what tools did the AI reference in order to create? Did it access some sort of calendar? Did it access something for scheduling or some other tool? What data sources did it access? Okay. What databases did it access? And to get to that final answer, right? And so there, you're able then to see the full trace of the AI system against a specific parameter. So let's just say, inequity-based recommendations for hypertension management or something like that, right? You specifically set up your eval for a specific parameter and detect that. And I think that creating that type of transparency as a vendor and a company, but also as a health system, I think that's what's going to be more valuable in making AI enterprise ready, because that's going to create a level of transparency and risk mitigation and governance that didn't exist before. The other cool part with this is that you also need to evaluate, as part of these AI evals, you have to have a subject matter expert. You have to have the expert come in and tell you whether this output is good or not. And then from those outputs, you can start creating what are called golden data sets, right? When you find the set of outputs that are absolutely perfect, you can then recreate your prompting infrastructure based on those responses to start creating better and more equitable responses from the system. And I think this is still evolving. You can actually use LLMs as judge. So like one of the I think words that's going to become very hot over the next 12 months, phrases, is LLM as a judge. So actually using an LLM to evaluate the accuracy and combining it with a subject matter expert, which is the typical workflow that a lot of the top AI companies are now using.
Excellent, excellent. I think that's very encouraging, because as we speak, we also have an AI lab that's being built in India, where we're creating just that, the LLM for the Indian demographics to kind of study what's happening in that space. So, as much as I'm greedy to have you here for longer and keep asking questions, I think it's time for us to bring an end to the podcast. And this is our final takeaway question, I would say, the infrastructure and the governance foundation, from data pipelines to ongoing evaluations. What foundational elements need to be in place for AI to be sustainable, which is very important? Sustainability is absolutely critical, and ethically sound over the long term. And how do you see that happening in the future?
Yeah, I think the real key is a standpoint of partnership between companies, vendors, and health systems. A statistic that's wild for me is that over 80% of US healthcare systems don't have data maturity, right? And so they don't have the data infrastructure nor the talent to run their own AI programs or even consider building, right? So they need to find more focused and point solutions. And so those companies coming in that are serving as more point solution focused vendors, right? Maybe you just want to do something for radiology and generate a CPT code for mammogram and mammography, right? Um, that company needs to be a partner. And that health system, what it can say is like, look, these are what our policies are important for us for monitoring your product and solution. And then that company can't come in and just offload that onto the health system, right? If they want to build value and build a partnership, they really need to come together as partners in governance. And I know it's hard because there's always issues of liability, who's responsible for what. In larger healthcare systems, it's that maybe you have more data maturity. It's really about creating that organizational infrastructure. And there's a lot of frameworks out there. Duke, UNC have built out some of these governance frameworks already. Coalition for Healthy AI have built out these governance frameworks. But honestly, a lot of that goes back to your people and your process and how are you managing the various solutions for your strategic initiatives. So, but it's something that you actually have to do. Like you can't just like write it down and just have the policy and not execute it. You actually have to do the thing because these systems will hallucinate. They will create wrong answers, and you need a system to pick up and detect all that.
Interesting. So pretty much walk the talk and do it in action. Yes.
I wish there was an easier way. I really do.
Well, thank you so much, Lukasz. I think it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and
likewise.
kind of dig in deeper into your wisdom of how you can make this AI space a lot more comfortable, a lot more equitable, and a lot more sustainable. And thanks to your time, Hikigai Studios is very grateful for your time and efforts.
Oh, well, I just love what you guys are doing in the space. I'm so happy for your success. And I know you all are applying a lot of these principles baked in already into your product and your entire business and your culture. So, and I think that's what's going to drive a lot of your success moving forward and differentiate you. So I'm just thrilled, looking forward to see how you all grow. And it's just wonderful having me on and being able to talk the stuff that I'm so passionate about.
Thank you so much, Lukasz.
You're so welcome, Lalitha. Take care.
Thank you.